Hi, people. So, with the Ukraine situation, there's a lot developing, obviously, and I'm going to put some links that I find interesting in these videos. I put three in the last video. I'll put some in this as well. Although this isn't going to be the main subject of the video, but Ukraine's such a big story right now that I can't really ignore it. Um, there were a few other interesting videos, and one of them involved a Ukrainian journalist, and she was speaking from the BBC studios in London, and her apartment had been bombed out, and she was being incredibly professional, keeping her emotions at bay as best as possible, but obviously seeing your home destroyed from thousands of miles away must be devastating. There will be a refugee crisis already. Poland, Romania, Hungary, um, Slovakia are taking in refugees, and it's going to be the world's fourth major refugee crisis. I mean, there's that in Southeast Asia with the Rohingya refugees. There's that on the US-Mexico border. There is, of course, the Mediterranean, and now this will be a next big refugee crisis. Um, there's a lot of things to say about this, and no doubt I'll omit something unintentionally. Except I want to point out for those who say that the West hasn't respected Russia and the West has provoked this. Let's not forget Russia was in the G8 for a while. I think the West has had many overtures to Russia, and in contrast to what Peter Hitchens was saying, I think I previously mentioned this. Russia has had chance after chance after chance for better relations with the West. The problem comes down to Vladimir Putin. Um, it's worth noting too that there's a growing number of people from within Russian society, Russian sports stars, for example, who are publicly saying that they don't support this, and credit to them. It's a brave position to take. Within Ukraine, the Klitschko brothers, of course, Vitaly is mayor of Kiev, um, are staying, and they will fight as will all Ukrainian men. I mean, these guys command enormous respect. Not only did they get to the top of the world's toughest sport and dominated it for a generation, and they easily rank among the greatest heavyweights ever, they're now prepared to die for the country. The Klitschko brothers are millionaires. They could probably get safe passage into Germany, but they're staying. Um, I mean that's just enormously brave. Um, There was one Ukrainian soldier defending a bridge, 21 years old. I mentioned that in the previous video. But the things that are coming out are just incredible. Anyway, on to the main point of the video. But Ukraine will absolutely be on my mind. I know that landmarks around the world have lit up in the yellow and blue of the Ukrainian flag in Taiwan, poignantly. In London, so the Cannes ordered buildings lit up in those colours, and around the world. The Empire State Building had the blue and yellow colours of Ukraine. Um, okay, I want to talk about British politics, and it's not totally unrelated because foreign policy is a huge part of this. I just want to talk about my sort of thoughts on British politics right now and where I stand because I haven't made a video like this for a while. Little bit of background: for 5 years, I was a member of the Liberal Democrats. Um, I left at the time because I had some fundamental differences with the party on policy area, most notably crime. I'm conservative on crime. The Liberal Democrats are a left-wing party, and their crime policies have always reflected that. But in the more immediate situation, I had issues with the coalition government. Now, I initially defended Nick Clegg because I think he saw the opportunity for power for his party, an opportunity that wouldn't come again, and he took it. Unfortunately, though, as we know from history, the junior partner in a coalition government will always be the one that loses out. So in 2015, the Dems got blamed for Tory excesses, the Tory cuts, and they were hammered in the polls. So um, it just shows that Britain doesn't do coalitions well. I don't think that for the sake of national interest, politicians working together is a bad thing. I think that's something that should be encouraged. Unfortunately, coalitions go beyond that, and it looks like selling out um, to be a junior partner of a party uh, of which there's many fundamental differences. More recently, Nick Clegg has become controversial, I think, for his role on Facebook and all of the negative side of that, all the controversial aspects of Facebook. Um, so that's my background, that's my political experience. I stood twice as a council candidate. I wasn't successful, but on the second occasion, I tripled my own result. I'm actually on Wikipedia. If you look up Sunderland council elections, 2008 and 2010, I stood for Hendon Ward. The first time I got 219 votes, I think it was. Second time, 773. So I've had some personal experience of politics on a small scale. I've also campaigned in the West Midlands and up here in the Northeast, but I haven't been aligned to any political party since 2010. Um, Truthfully speaking, I'm not overly enthusiastic about anyone. Of the three big unionist parties, I don't really count UKIP because they've kind of faded away since Brexit. Of Conservatives, Labour, and Liberal Democrats, um, naturally what I'd be looking at is a centrist party, which would, in normal circumstances, be the Liberal Democrats. But I think in recent years, they've just went down a direction of pandering to the woke left, a bit like Labour. Um, and I just don't think they've become a shadow of their former selves. You know, the Liberal Democrats, they did govern. They were part of a government, you know, so I don't think they are necessarily a small party. I think there's a lot of people within the Liberal Democrats who are sensible and their heart's in the right place. But as a party, it's difficult to take it seriously when they pander to woke causes. Um, I'm not saying that every area they are not practical, but it's just hard to take them very seriously these days. So then I look at Labour. Well, let me first of all explain why I don't support the Conservatives. Um, in some areas, such as crime, I would expect the Tories to be more aligned to my way of thinking. I'm hardline on crime. Um, Incidentally, I've just had one of those guys that kind of sells things. They're ex-offenders. If I had the money, I would consider supporting him as a sort of it seems like a reasonable initiative. I have a few issues with it. Firstly, my mum's bought from them and she said that they'll keep coming back and buying more and more. So it's not like, well, I'll help you out this time. It's sort of, I've heard that there's an issue there of exploiting people's generosity. And also, I don't know, there's a trust factor. You know, you can imagine a pensioner answering the door. They're obliged to say that they're an ex-offender, and maybe they are trying to go straight. So I've got some sympathy with them, but I'm not sure if it's the best approach going to people's homes. I think it would be better doing it on the streets rather than going to people's doors, because most people are going to be uneasy about that, even if they know that these guys are just trying to go straight. I say guys because I haven't had any female offenders yet. But anyway, not to derail. Yeah, so on an issue like crime, I'd naturally be looking at the Conservatives as being the party of law and order. But frankly, they talk tough, but I think they failed to deliver, really. We still see ridiculously soft sentences. We still see Yobs getting away with too much. And we still see a justice system that, in my view, is massively out of touch. Um, in terms of patriotism and national security, again, I would expect the Tories to be strong on that. Now, I think Liz Truss is. I think Dominic Raab was tough on China. But again, this is an area I've got question marks. Boris Johnson personally flip flops. He's a flip flopper. I mean, he talks tough with China one day, then he's pandering to China the next. He basically wastes his time over the Huawei decision. I think there's times Johnson has not been assertive. He hasn't shown statesmanship. He wavers, and that's just not good enough. I want to see a prime minister who isn't afraid to speak out against Russia and China. Johnson's been assertive on Russia, not so much with China. Um, His retort is, "Oh well, I love China. I'm a Sinophile," and I just don't. I think he's hesitant to take a hard line with Beijing. I question why. Incidentally, that spy that was found out earlier this year, Christine Lee, who'd been operating in this country for something like 20 years, bizarrely, she still hasn't been arrested or deported. Now, maybe that's because they can't find her. But why can't the police at least issue an arrest warrant? This woman, if there's credible evidence that she has been involved in espionage, what's going on? I actually put this to the former Foreign Secretary, now Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, in his weekly sort of Facebook interaction thing. And he said, well, for obvious reasons, we can't go into details, but rest assured we will be assertive when it comes to these. I think he put it nefarious activities of the Chinese state. Okay, but what's going to happen with her? I mean, I think we should send out a message to Beijing by arresting her, charging her with espionage, not just deporting her, because that would, then she'll just bring the secrets with her. If MI5 can publicly announce that she's a security threat, I don't see why we don't have a basis to take action against her. It's nonsensical. It might be because we think that Beijing would retaliate and we don't want to be in a situation like the two Michaels. But that shouldn't be a reason to not take action. I don't understand it. I really don't. It might be for security reasons that information isn't being divulged. I don't know, but it's very strange that over a month on, nothing has happened with her. I mean, she could easily be just transferring, like she's thought, okay, my cover's blown now, so now I transfer the information back to Beijing. What the hell? Um, so in national security, I'd like to say that I think the Tories are strong. I think Liz Truss is, and I think that there's plenty of Tories who are adequately hawkish, but there's also too many that, for example, Johnson himself, but also the Tories are suspiciously close to Russian oligarchs. Um, I think there's big question marks on where Tory funding comes from, and if there's any sign of any money from Putin kleptocrats, that's just. I think the Tories have long been too cozy with Russian billionaires. So again, I'm not overly enthusiastic about foreign policy. On China, perhaps its government's been a bit more assertive than its predecessors, but I don't think we've gone far enough. Um, In other areas, I think that there is a bit of a survival of the fittest area attitude in Tory ranks. I do think there's this kind of idea that if people are struggling, it must be their own fault. Um, this is an area where I have always been more to the left. Um, I really don't believe in hammering claimants, for example, whilst big multinational companies can get away with not paying tax. It just seemed that to me there is a certain survival of the citizen mentality among the Tories, and I can never overlook the way that they have treated claimants in terms of these soul destroying work capability assessments, the way they speak down to people, the way they have these divisive campaigns, strivers versus scroungers. I can't overlook that, and the Tories have a long record of doing it. Homelessness has increased on their watch. So there's a lot of areas that don't sit well with me with Tory domestic policy. Um, but then I look at Labour. Now, let me just say from the outset, I think Starmer is a much, much better leader than Jeremy Corbyn. But honestly, Corbyn is a very low bar. Corbyn was, in some areas, to give him his due or to give him some credit, I suppose he was sufficiently compassionate on areas of homelessness and, not demonising the unemployed in those sort of areas. I mean, Corbyn was a good socialist in those areas. However, when it came to his worldview, I think Jeremy Corbyn was dangerously anti-West, as was his inner circle. Diane Abbott, John McDonnell, Seamus Milne, and they've proven that yet again with their statements in allegiance with the Stop the War coalition. So whatever Keir Starmer can be accused of, at least he hasn't got that sort of worldview. Um, to be fair to Starmer, he has been consistently outspoken on China and Russia. Now, that is one of the most important things I look for in a leader. When Starmer makes his addresses, he always has the UK flag behind him. Now, some might say this is tokenism or it's a facade. I think it matters in a party that has far left elements that basically imply they hate this country. What Starmer is doing is saying, I'm not ashamed to be patriotic. I'm not ashamed of our national flag. This is a man who wants to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Why is it inappropriate for him to have our national flag behind him? To me, it seems totally normal for any leader to do that. I don't think it's false patriotism. I don't think it's jingoism or anything like that. If anything, I would say moderates, mainstream politicians taking away that sort of nationalism from the far right is a good thing. So why would the left oppose that? You know, would they rather that Keir Starmer, as a centre ground Labour leader, is in front of the flag, or would they rather that was taken by far right types? I do think there's a lot of far leftists who just have a problem with this country. I mean, people who are so hung up on wanting to decolonize that they ignore what tyrants are doing around the world today. It's pathetic. It really is. That brings me to a paradox about Keir Starmer and his Labour Party. Firstly, it's a very big party, right? In terms of membership, it's one of the biggest parties in Europe. Being Labour leader is never ever easy. Being leader of Her Majesty's opposition is never going to be easy. In some areas, I'm not happy with Starmer. I'm not happy with the fact that he continues to pander to the woke left. I'm not happy with the fact he's done nothing to help reinstate Sir Trevor Phillips for talking about the problem of Islamic extremism in this country. Now, after the teacher was threatened in Batley in West Yorkshire, neither Boris Johnson nor Keir Starmer spoke out. Why? It may be one incident, but to me that's symbolic of a wider problem. Why didn't they speak out? I have a big problem with that. And if I ever was at a Q&A with Starmer, I would ask him directly. I would say, Mr. Starmer, why did you not speak out? Um, but overall, I want to be able to support Starmer. I would honestly think about voting Labour at the next election if Starmer continues this assertive foreign policy approach. I think he has also sounded statesman-like recently. I think he's sounded prime ministerial. My big misgiving with Starmer, well, there's a few things actually. I mentioned that he panders too much to the woke left of his party. I also think the left in general is too keen to continue COVID restrictions. There is a big statism with the left that I've never liked. I do think people like Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan, if they had their way, restrictions would continue for years. Now, they have to understand the public mood. They have to understand that people have, in good faith, taken the vaccines. They want this to end. They want the restrictions to end. And something like mask wearing, I don't agree with those who say it's trivial. It's not. It's a symbol of the restrictions that we faced over the last 2 years. So that's one area I'm uneasy with the left. They've always liked big statism. And both Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer show that with their stances. So I think Starmer needs to say, people need to be responsible. I urge you to take the vaccine. But I think he needs to publicly state that he would be in favour of even easing restrictions, even if he doesn't agree with the Prime Minister's timeline. The fact that he seems to want unlimited restrictions to me is a big question mark. So, yeah, I think that that's another area I'm not happy with the Labour Party on. But I want to have faith in the Labour Party. I want to have a party that I would vote for. Um, there's too many areas domestically of the Tories I'm not too happy about. Labour, there's a few things Labour would need to do to prove to me that they're worth voting for. Crime's a big issue to me. Now, recently, Angela Rayner has spoken tough. Um, but there's contradictions because, by the same token, Yvette Cooper has condemned the policing bill. She says it would make it criminal for people to have a loudspeaker in the streets. Well, no, that bill is designed to stop the likes of Insulate Britain from their criminal activities. So I want to see senior Labour figures condemning the tactics of Insulate Britain. That would show to me that they're a serious party, a party that aspires to be in government, rather than just another left wing protest party, which I don't think they are. You know, the Labour Party has a proud history. It's a party of the NHS. It's a party that has produced some good policies over the years. As a centrist, I would honestly consider the Labour Party. I don't think it's a Mickey Mouse party. I think it's a serious party. And Starmer, if I was ranking him out of 10 for his leadership so far, I'd give him probably a strong 5, no higher. I give him a strong 5 because I do think he's been consistently tough on Russia and China. And I think his worldview is a lot more healthy than Corbyn's. But I'm not happy with some of his domestic views. I'm not happy with his pandering to the woke left. I'm not happy with his attitude to trans issues and his failure to support women in his party in that sense. Um, as for the Tories, for the reasons I've said, I have too many misgivings. The truth is, I'm not overly enthusiastic about any of these parties right now, or any of the leaders right now. When I look out there, I don't really see any centrist leader who will really promote the sort of positions I want to see. Starmer is possibly the best at the moment. I really don't have much faith in Boris Johnson. I think that he flip flops. I don't think he's a serious leader. Sometimes he's tough. I mean, his statement on Russia was good, okay, but he's not consistent. He's really not. And that's a big problem. I think Starmer's a lot more consistent. Um, and obviously the Partygate thing, to me, that's not a trivial matter. It speaks about double standards and it speaks about an entitlement, which I think Boris Johnson has always had. This is a man who has always promoted the idea of kind of elite privilege. I mean, if you look at Boris Johnson's track record, he's always advocated for the rich. So the left wing side of me thinks that Johnson, I just don't trust him to have the British public's interests at heart. I think he's a populist, and I think he tells people what they want to hear. Now, Starmer has supported the government when he's had to. And I don't agree with those who say Starmer just made pot shots. I think he has done what an opposition leader should do. He's held the government to account, but he supported the government when necessary. I want to support Starmer, but I'm not happy with some of the positions that he's taken. I want to support him because I think he looks and sounds prime ministerial. He doesn't praise terrorist groups as friends. But like I say, that Corbyn's a very low bar. So being better than Corbyn isn't necessarily a great achievement. So time will tell. I'll be looking more closely at Labour's domestic politics policies. I'm quite confident with Starmer in terms of foreign policy. I think he's quite assertive, but domestic policies I'll need to scrutinise more. I'll round this up. I'm sure there's a lot more that I could say. I think with Brexit, it's done. I really don't think Brexit's going to be a major political issue anymore. Um, as for Scottish independence, I honestly think the momentum's fizzled out. I think that the Nationalists know this. Um, I mean, if they were to call for a referendum now, after what we've went through with COVID, and particularly with what's happening in Ukraine, it would just look opportunistic. Nicola Sturgeon's a lot of things, but I don't think she's stupid. I honestly think the momentum for an independent Scotland has gone. I just don't think there's that much of an appetite. I'm not saying that Scottish nationalists aren't vocal; they are, but I honestly think their momentum has gone. So that's good. Maybe the dust can finally settle in this country. Brexit is done. We've been through those divisive referendums. Um, in a sense, it's almost politics as normal again. COVID winding down. Um, but we do live in an uncertain world, and I think I want a British government that is tough with Beijing and Moscow and isn't afraid to stand up against them. With Boris Johnson, it goes up and down. Sometimes he's tough, sometimes he isn't. We need a leader who's consistently tough and assertive. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I'm sure there'll be more to add, but for now, I'm just going to be watching the Labour Party closely. If I never expect to have a situation where I'm 100% happy with everything, but if I could get to a point where I'm 75, 80% happy, I'd vote for them. Um, Clearly, I'm not going to agree with every single policy, but if if Labour sufficiently has domestic politics policies that I can agree with, I would consider voting for them. But they need to get back to bread and butter issues. I mean, the woke left of Labour is quite influential, but I would say the bulk of people who vote Labour isn't kind of woke students. It's just ordinary people who are not interested in trans pronouns. They're not interested in decolonisation. They're interested in everyday issues. Price hikes, crime, justice, um, transport issues, those sort of things. If Labour really, really focuses on those, if Starmer continues to hold the government to account, but do it in a fair way, support the government when necessary, I think he's a prime minister in waiting. Time will tell.